Hi, now we're going to talk about the unannounced observation. The unannounced observation itself falls onto the supervising practitioner to conduct. However, the program supervisor has a pretty important role as well. If you were to show up that day during the observation, it wouldn't be particularly unannounced. So we really try and have the supervising practitioner run that observation. Once the supervising practitioner runs the observation, he or she needs to code the notes that they've taken during the observation and enter their data into the form. Now, what does the form look like? That's what we're going to talk about now. So I'm going to find the unannounced, whichever one is the next in your list, and I'm going to click on it. Now, you will likely need to remind the person, hold on one second, I've got an empty one for you and a full one for you. You likely need to remind the supervising practitioner, just because they're very busy, that they need to fill this out. But you may very well come upon a completely blank unannounced observation form. You really can't fill anything out at this point, so you're going to need to email that supervising practitioner and say, hi, could you please fill this out within, and it's helpful for them if you give them a nice time frame. Now remember, they're only required to fill out the particular measures that are in bold and in italics in the margin. So if you look here, well-structured lessons, not bold, not italics, you may not get feedback on any measures that are not the bare minimum requirements, in which case you don't have a lot to work with. But let's look at a completed form so I can show you what my role, the program supervisor, was in the unannounced observation. I'd like to make a point that I just unlocked this form. At any point in the semester, you can unlock the forms and it will allow you to do any edits in the form. So don't stress about clicking complete and save your work at any point. You can always go back in. It just locks the page for you. Okay, so here the supervising practitioner went in just like I needed her to, and she entered in the date, the time, the topic. She said it was whole group. And now let's look at the first element. Now this particular element, well-structured lessons for this particular observation, was required. So good, I'm glad to see that the supervising practitioner took the time to put good notes in here. When I got this form, when I came to this form, there was nothing under calibrated evidence. That tends to be what I see. The supervising practitioner will just fill out her section. Now, it's unannounced. I can't really fill out this section if I wasn't at the observation, right? Well, what I have my students do is, in addition to submitting to me a reflection after the lesson using the self-reflection form that you can find on the CAP Guidelines website, I also have them submit the lesson plan, so I at least have something to work on. So I was able to review the lesson plan from my student, and as I read and reviewed what the supervising practitioner wrote, I added my perspectives into the calibrated evidence. So I did actually have content to add, not for every single CAP element, but for some of them, and well-structured lessons is a pretty low-hanging fruit for that. That worked out really well. So I always structure my notes as commendations and recommendations. When this is saved and made available to the teacher candidate, it will just chunk it into one large paragraph. So you might consider using numbers or letters in parentheses to bracket each piece of feedback. After I went in and added this calibrated evidence, I emailed the teacher and said, I'm done. I've entered in all the calibrated evidence. Can you just review it and make sure it still reflects what your thoughts were? That seems to be very helpful. Occasionally I'll miss a major point and the supervising practitioner will email me and say, hey, you forgot this. Let's continue down the form. The next one, adjustment to practice. Now this is interesting. Notice in the margin it's not bold. It does not have a star associated with it. I'll zoom in a little bit more. And the supervising practitioner didn't write anything. So where did this content come from? This is from me. What I found is, in reading the supervisor evidence, practitioner evidence from other entries, I found that she was talking about content that I felt was better situated in adjustment to practice. So I just took the phrases and the words that she used and I put them in here under adjustment to practice. So for example, TC needs to focus on time management. The supervising practitioner mentioned that somewhere else in the document, but it really should go into adjustment to practice. This is really nice, to have at least some feedback in every single calibrated evidence for teacher candidate element. Because when you get to the formative and the summative, this is what will show up. And if you have nothing in there because the supervising practitioner didn't give you any information on it, you're not going to have a lot of evidence to give a student rating at the formative and the summative. So you really make a big effort to try and have something in every calibrated evidence box. Okay, moving down to the bottom, notice we didn't have anything in here. It wasn't required, the supervising practitioner didn't have anything to say about it. I didn't see anything in the lesson plan or the reflection that helped me pull evidence in here. And I didn't see that the supervising practitioner wrote something about it somewhere else for me to pull in here. So this ends up as nothing, which on that formative assessment, this whole observation, I've got no information for meeting diverse needs now, which is unfortunate. Okay, next, safe learning environment. We had some good information, high expectations. I was able to populate that based on other feedback from the teacher. Reflective practice. The supervising practitioner really never fills that in. I fill that in when I get that reflective, the self-reflection form from my teacher candidate. Again, I make the CAP Guidelines website available to my teacher candidate so they can get the form, they fill it out as a Word form, and then they email it to me. So I get that within 24 hours of every observation. Now this is additional evidence, nobody had anything to say. Down here, what I tend to find is the supervising practitioner will fill out this middle piece for strengths and for areas of growth, and I need to go in, look at all of their feedback, look at the stuff I added, and then come up with major salient points. In these boxes, I tend to organize it by the type of feedback, for example, well-structured lessons, safe learning environment, that sort of thing. This is part of what I ask the supervising practitioner to review before we actually finalize it. Now, after I've entered in all my content, I have the option of now clicking complete and save work. The supervising practitioner has already clicked complete and save work, hopefully. Once you've both done that, these calibrated evidence boxes should be available to the teacher candidate. So you just want to confirm with the teacher candidate that he or she can actually see it. This is great because they'll be able to see it before any follow-up post-observation meeting.